Hi, I'm Ryan North.
I'm Lori Fungi.
And I'm Shawn Wilson. You're listening to Foster Family Matters, a production of CK Family Services. People united through God to enhance the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of at-risk children and families. Welcome back to Foster Family Matters. Thanks for joining us again. We hope you all had a fantastic Mother's Day.
Yes.
And hope that you picked up our Happy Mother's Day episode that we put out as a little bonus for you guys. Today we're continuing. So 2 weeks ago we released an episode. Is that right? Is my timing right? Two weeks ago we
I depend on you entirely for my timing of these matters, Shawn.
We are all in trouble. My internal clock is all kinds of weird. But at some point,
I feel confident 2 weeks ago.
At some point in the recent past, we released Transitions 1. We actually called it "Summer is Coming" as kind of a play on words with the Game of Thrones. Winter is coming.
That sounds very threatening. Summer is coming.
Dun,
Well,
dun, dun.
for some, it can feel threatening. I think, right?
Amen.
Can I get a witness?
Yeah. So today we had so much we wanted to talk about, and we try to limit ourselves to 20 or 30 minutes or so per episode, and so we are doing kind of a transitions part 2 today.
Yep.
And I think that we'll likely go all over the place, but we'll try to focus on kind of, before we talked about kind of macro and micro level transitions, or kind of life level transitions versus event level transitions. And I think today we'll try to do a little more kind of event level. Is that right, Lori?
Correct.
Yeah. And so take it away, guys. What do we have to say about transitions part 2?
If I may say this, if you don't set up the children for success, you're going to set them up for failure, right? That's a binary decision. It's succeed or fail when it comes to these kinds of things. And we know that everybody likes predictability. Nobody likes change. But we do know that traumatized people like predictability even more than people that don't have big trauma histories.
I think need it
more, yes.
Rely on it.
That's true, because the unpredictability actually is processed as scary.
Absolutely.
And so we have to manage transitions. And I know, one of the things pushback we always get from folks is when are the kids going to be able to do these things for themselves? And we'll remind you that unless you taught somebody how to do something, they're not going to know how to do it, right? But kids don't develop in isolation. And so it's a great skill for teaching them to manage a lot of things, their time, their transitions. I'll give you an example at our house. We used to say stuff. So at our house, there's a big basket by the front door where everybody puts their shoes when they come in the home. And so, but oddly enough, some they put 2 shoes in there, but only 1 shoe remains.
Yeah, what is that? That's like the socks in the dryer
It
thing,
is
right?
exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly
like
like the socks in the dryer. So we'd say stuff like, so we were going to my wife's parents for dinner one Friday night, and we'd say, okay, find your shoes, it's time to go. And then 30 minutes later, we were still at home. And we were really, really frustrated and probably found ourselves yelling at the children, which I now confess in a public forum myself to yell at my children.
Guilty.
And so what we learned that night is that it takes 30 minutes for everybody to get their stuff together and get to the car. So if we need to leave at 6, we'll tell them at 5:30 it's time to go. Right? So that's something the adults have to do. So for me, that's always my favorite example of managing transitions from doing the fun things at home, whether that be playing video games, watching TV shows, reading books, riding bicycles, whatever the kids like to do. For us to manage that transition from the thing they're doing, which they really, really are enjoying and invested in, to the next thing that needs to happen, it is the adult's responsibility to manage that transition. And so figuring out what works for your family is super important, in
Absolutely.
my humble opinion.
And I think in the same breath, looking at and figuring out what is a transition. And in the most simplistic way, it's realizing that almost everything we do from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're transitioning from one event to another. And so yours, and I think that it's important that you noted something fun that our kids are doing, from going from something fun to something maybe a little less desirable, or something that has to get done, like eating dinner or eating lunch or doing homework during the school year. Those things need to get done.
Taking your weekly shower, whatever.
Going to the restroom.
Amen, right? Yes. Get up. I know you have to pee right now. I see it. You're doing the dance. Go.
You're dancing. We can pause.
And in realizing that we experience this, I think any parent experiences this dozens and dozens times a day. And if we don't really get a grasp on it, we're not gonna feel successful by the end of the day. That's when we lay in bed and we go, man, I really jacked this one up today. Everything just went awry. The wheels completely fell off. And it could happen for a myriad of reasons, but I think the most common is that we're not getting a good handle on how we're preparing our children for transitions.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking how if you're in you get a new job and you're required to use some proprietary software, but nobody trains you on that software, and then you mess things up, we can go, right, we all accept that, oh my gosh, that person should have been trained, right? If only they trained that person. Yep. However, when it comes to children, we want them just to organically figure things out. And sometimes people say, well, shouldn't the children be held responsible for their actions? I think once you have trained them, that's a great idea. But just assuming that they will do these things well when they've had no model of that, they've had no mentoring it, they've had no coaching in it, to assume that they will do these things well, it's a mistake, which I'm sure at some point we're going to have to do an episode on having reasonable expectations, because I think you do have to have realistic expectations. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, in the parent-child relationship, all of the responsibility to act like an adult belongs to the parent. And I think we can't abdicate our responsibility.
And I'm wondering if that's where the hang-up starts, is that the idea is, well, they just need to know it, right? So it's time to get in the car. But I think going a step further back and being even a little bit more vulnerable, I'm wondering how much of it is, I told you what to do and you're not listening to me. I'm the parent. I'm in control.
Pride.
And it's the pride. Yeah. And it's the lack of respect. It's the negation of who I am and my authority and my control in this situation. I asked you to do something and you're not doing it. You are thereby being disrespectful to me. And that's so common. And that's the way I was raised. So for me to not raise my children that way was something that I had to be incredibly intentional about and get down on their level and see from their experience and from their eyes of that expectation is my expectation, not one that I want to place on my children.
We're really kind of going in a direction that veers a little bit away from
totally
transitions, right? But but that's okay, because I think it's important and it's kind of foundational, not just to parenting, but kind of the human experience. Because pride's something that bleeds into every facet of our lives, and whether it's a disagreement with people at work, or whether it's a disagreement with your spouse or your best friend or your mother or your children or your pets or whomever, whatever living organism that you come into contact with, it frequently, when you boil it down to its essence, comes down to, I'm upset because my person somehow is threatened, offended, my status, my sense of security, my well-being is somehow threatened, right? And it's almost laughable, and people get offended, again, re-offended, if you point out to them that their response by doubling down on their kid is really in response to their own insecurities, but it's true.
Right.
Yeah, so if I may say something about both you guys' comments, I actually thought to myself, Fungi, you have opened Pandora's box, because we're still going to be sitting here 5 hours from now just talking about the stuff you just said.
Hold on a second. Let me call Daniel. I'm going to need a larger hard drive.
Can somebody... and then you handled that way more diplomatically than the way I just did. But it's so... it is so true. It is when the sense of self gets offended somehow that we have to push back on that. But I'll remind you again, if you have to tell people you're in charge, you're probably not.
Not in charge.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when my dad and I, when we discuss things, and if those discussions turn into disagreements, there's always one common thread, is that he really doubles down on the way things should be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's not how things are. And that's where we get to the point of differentiation. And I think that in our minds, we have this idea of the way things should be.
Right.
But then there is this reality that sets in our home. And I mean, to be fair, change is hard. Back to the transition thing, right? It's just changing from one thing to another. And so this idea of what you looked like, what you thought the family might look like, how you thought the kids might act, I don't know if you thought the kids would always be nicely dressed with their hair done nicely and refer to mom as mother dear or anything. And if any of that was from watching TV shows in the 50s and 60s or anything like that. But the truth of the matter is, at my house, it's loud and it's rowdy, and we have to sort of live in that space, and we have to set our kids up for success. And one of the ways that we do that is managing transitions well. If you need the kids to do something, like my wife always said, every single time I tell the kids, you guys need to stop playing video games or whatever, I need you to unload the dishwasher. Mm-hmm. They always would say, can I have a compromise? What's a compromise? Can we have 10 more minutes? Okay. So now my wife goes, I need that done in 10 minutes. Can you guys need to stop playing video games and then unload the dishwasher? Can we have a compromise? What's your compromise? 10 minutes? I'll set a timer. So if we want to talk about, you said at the beginning, practical advice, here's some of my practical advice.
Alexa is great for that.
It is. It's the only thing we use our microwave for is the timer.
Let's set everyone's Alexa timer right now. Alexa. Set a timer for 10 minutes.
I feel a little bit ashamed talking about pride. I do not have an Alexa. But I'm also the one that reads books on paper, Lori, and has a calendar on paper.
This is the studio of affirmation. There is no shame here.
Thank you.
No shame.
We affirm your unexplainable right to have a paper calendar.
We don't understand it.
You don't have to understand it.
But we see you and we hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel very accepted in this space right now.
I feel like you should more feel mocked.
So, I know. Then I'm sure I am over the airwaves. Ba-dum-bum. But for families that maybe don't have Alexa, I think
the Google makes a product too.
Get the Google one then.
Well played, Sarah.
While it's being delivered to your house, you can use egg timers. You can use timers on your phone. You can use the timers on your microwave. I really love to empower kiddos, I'd say as young as 6 all the way into teenagers, looking for watches and getting their buy-in, buying them a watch, whether it's analog or digital, but to help them be accountable for time and be accountable for what's to come.
And also teach them a life skill and how to tell time.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's like double duty. I really like that.
So you have plenty of options.
You do have plenty of options, and watches that kids like my daughter, my 6-year-old, has a watch that has one of her favorite cartoon characters on it, and it was like $5 at a large store that has blue and yellow writing.
It's okay. You can say Best Buy.
I meant to say Walmart, actually. Both got a plug.
Man.
Speaking of the phone, though, my wife has, and I'll have her send it to you, Shawn. So if you want to get the show notes, or whatever, she has a timer on this that's a visual timer. So at the end, when the timer goes, like you can watch it, or like a candle pops up and the kids can blow the candle out or whatever on the screen. So the kids actually enjoy having to get to do something at the end of the timer. But what we've found is, as much as they go, we want to play, we don't want to stop this, can we have a compromise? As much as that goes, if we actually set a timer on like the phone or the microwave or any kind of thing like that, we actually find their ability to stop what they're doing and move to the next thing astounds me every time, because it's now not a personal emotional engagement with the parent. It's now me versus the clock, and the clock won, so I accept that. I really oversimplified that, but it is there's less drama surrounding it than I always expect there to be, because they're kind of like, okay, Alexa, stop, and then they move on to the next thing. So
sure.
It's good.
Well, and let me throw something out. So I have a 5-year-old at home who loves watching. We monitor and restrict her TV watching abilities quite a bit, but she has a couple of shows. Pinkalicious is one in particular. If you have a 5-year-old daughter, you know what I'm talking
check that
about.
out. I know what that is.
It's exactly what you think that it is.
My 6-year-old just watches
all the time.
Watches unboxing videos on YouTube now.
Yeah,
that's all she does.
Yeah. We do a little bit of that, but there's that. I don't even know his name, but there's a child, a parent-child combo who started out on YouTube unboxing toys and playing with them, and he grew to such popularity that he now has a show like on PBS, or maybe it's Nickelodeon. I don't remember, one of the networks.
What is this world coming to?
We live in a crazy world,
right? But and my daughter loves it. She's like, I want to watch this kid play with toys. Like, she wants to do that more than playing with the toy herself.
She's vicariously living through him.
Well, she gets that. She comes by that, honestly. Her father might like that sort of video game.
It's
Anyways,
people unboxing like electronics.
I digress. The point that I'm trying to make is that we kind of did the whole thing, and I want to ask you guys a question about how you determine 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever that kind of time is that you're with, right? And I think it's kind of child specific, but a lot of times I find having to kind of nurture my daughter through a transition away from that when we've allowed her to watch a show or two shows, and now it's time for that to come to an end. It's always best if we kind of set her up and say in the beginning, okay, you can watch 2 episodes, you can watch 1 episode, and then sometimes things happen in my life to where I now suddenly feel the need to pull her away instantly, even though I've told her she can have 2, and I have to kind of take a step back and go, wait a second, I've already made a commitment here. Like this is I've committed to my daughter. You can have this much time to engage in this activity. And so instead of telling her, whoa, everything's gone crazy, now you have to stop this right now, I'll stop my stuff. I'll kind of dial my stuff back, right? And that's where a couple of episodes ago I started it off by asking you guys if has your experience in parenting ever really felt convenient? And I think if you're parenting right, you feel inconvenienced consistently, because I think it's a lot of that, right? It's a lot of having to check your own needs and your own set of circumstances in order to meet the needs of our kids. So, but back to the television thing. If you're watching TV on the internet, you usually have like a play bar at the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you get into a set of circumstances where you need to put an end to their current activity and move them on, instead of just telling them arbitrarily 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes, I usually ask her, how much time's left on that show? Yep. And she'll go, I don't know. She'll mouse over and I can see on the bar. And I'll usually pad it by a couple of minutes just so that we don't have confrontation at the end of it, because she invariably will start the next episode, without it. But that's worked for me. Like find a time that works for them and work that into whatever it is that you need to manage. I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I think that one of my favorite things is if I can parent my children in such a way that they go to bed at night and go, wow, my parents are reasonable people. For me, that's a parenting win. And so if our kids are watching something, on YouTube or Netflix or anything like that, we'll typically ask them to pause so we can see how much time's left. Because if it's, unless it's like, and we don't let the kids watch TV after dinner, typically until bedtime. There's typically some downtime for their minds before they have to go to their beds. Mm-hmm. But I might say, there's like 17 minutes left. Why don't we just pause it now? You come unload the dishwasher, then you can watch the rest of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And they seem to be pretty good with that. So we'll be willing to compromise and be creative. Mm-hmm. I think that connected parenting has to make you an intentional parent. I think that it is convenient, and that's okay. That's okay, because often we ask parents, why do you say no to your children as much as you do? And they'll come back and say, I really paid attention to that, and it turns out that I just actually wanted to sit on the couch and watch sports.
Right.
And the kids need better than that. And so I think that's great to kind of check. I think to be flexible is really, really great. There's very, very rarely really hard stops in our day. Mm-hmm. Even if we're going to grandma's house. If grandma has to wait 15 more minutes and I have to hear how dinner's cold or any of those things, that's okay. I can handle that. And I know right now people are listening saying, you're just advocating for the children controlling the home.
Guaranteed.
I'm not. I'm not advocating for the children controlling the home. What I am saying is that if I have to give 5 minutes and that allows us to peacefully conclude something, I will give 5 minutes.
Yep.
I think you have to think tactically in that. But for a lot of times, parents, that phrase, is this the hill you want to die on today?
Sure.
Is too often answered yes about every single hill.
Well, if I said to you, if you're wanting to buy this cell phone from me, and I said, you can either buy it for $100 or you can buy it for $500. Are you ever going to actively choose the $500?
No.
You're going to choose the $100 or try to talk me down from that. But frequently as parents, we try to go, we take actions that we know are going to result in a $500 charge to our account with our children. But we do it and justify it because it's going to be worth it, because my time is now more important than the value of my relationship with my child, right?
Yep.
And it's really hard to think about it that way, but that's what we're doing. Because if you think about how you're treated in your day-to-day life, if people treat you the way that you're treating your child in that moment, how do you feel about them, and what does it do to your relationship with that adult?
Yep.
and back to what you said this at the beginning of this episode, that it was about authority and just because, basically just because you have a title, just because you are a parent, just because you're CEO, just because you're supervisor, doesn't mean that you're leading.
Yeah.
Having a title doesn't mean anything more than somebody has given you a title, right? In order to actually be a parent, you have to have children that are engaging with you.
Yeah, so that idea actually, just a little insight, everybody listening. We would, Lori and I were trading A Few Good Men dialogue lines during the warm-up for this episode.
You can't handle the truth.
I can. I challenge your assessment of me. But at the end of that
It's okay,
movie...
Ryan, this is a safe place.
I feel affirmed. And so at the end of the movie, when Tom Cruise walks out of the courtroom, he says to Dawson and Downey, the two Marines who are on trial, he says, "You don't need to wear a uniform to have honor."
Right.
Which is what made me think about, like, you don't have to have a title to lead.
That's it.
And I wholeheartedly believe that parenting is one of the greatest leadership laboratories you will ever find yourself in, because if we are focused on compliance in the moment, then anything that deviates against, and we'll talk about this here in future episodes, I happen to know because of the book that's in front of me, that we have this command and demand idea about parenting.
Yeah.
And if that works for you, tweet us. We'd love to hear about it. But if it doesn't, as I suspect it doesn't, then you have to find a way to connect in relationship, and moving forward from that place of connected relationship, actually move into the future. And I think that leaders need to be inspirational. They need to be creative. They need to be out of the box thinkers. I was full in the blank as a child, and I turned out fine is something that we hear far too often. And again, I don't want to necessarily rabbit trail down that, but just because it worked for you does not necessarily mean it's going to work for the child in front of you, because you're different people, your lived experiences are different, your belief systems are different. Shawn, you sent an interesting TED talk around last week with, I forget the guy's name, the dude from...
Paul Rilkins, I believe. Yes,
Rilkins, that sounds right. And he tells a story about when Einstein was a professor at Oxford, and he hands out the final exam at the end of the year, and the students look at it, one of them raises his hand, and he says, "Professor Einstein, this is the exact same final exam you gave us a year ago." And Einstein says, "Yes, I know." And he says, "No, I mean like all the questions are exactly the same." And Einstein said, "Yes, but the answers are different."
Mm-hmm. Just let that sit there for a second.
No,
I think that's it's profound.
And it's profound to sit there for a second, because if that didn't just like mess with everybody's minds, and again, I don't want to. This isn't meant to challenge your sense of right or wrong or truth or any of those things, right?
No, but there's a common thing. I'm sitting here smiling as I'm listening to you, gentlemen. There's a common theme in what you're both saying, and it goes back to self-awareness, and it goes back to who am I as a parent? Yep. What am I willing to make concessions for, and when am I not? When is my control feeling jeopardized? And if it is feeling jeopardized, why does that bother me? It's because I operate in a controlled space. I'm a controlling type of person. Control is regulating to me, and when anything comes into my life to threaten that or to thwart that, I'm become dysregulated as a parent, right? Kids are going to do that. They are going to zap all control because they are trying to figure out their own autonomy and independence. And I think we see that when we go back to transitions and just on the very micro level, what does this look like day to day? It means that we are going from playing the video game to, "Hey, bud, I need you to be done in 5 minutes and get ready for dinner. I don't want to." And we feel it inside. It can be a very visceral reaction. We start to charge because we're preparing ourselves for this, what we imagine is going to be a battle. Where instead it's some of the applications that we've shared, such as, okay, totally get it. In 30 minutes, I'll give you 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever that looks like. It's going to be time. Got it? And we high five it. And it's not just a conversation, it's a connection. It's, do you understand what I'm saying to you? I hear you, you hear me. We're agreeing on this, and this is part of our plan. One of my things with my kids, is it a plan? We high five a plan. So anything I say, is it a plan? High five it. It's buy-in from the kiddo. He's on or she's on my side. They've understood. So I have compliance and comprehension in a really simple act, a high five.
Well, I love that if it's a plan, it's a high five with the kids, because
that's a contract. It's legally binding.
It's legally binding. And so there was an exchange of energy with the high five. I was thinking during all of that, Lori, that one of the keys to actually seeing success in any form of parenting, let alone parenting kids with trauma histories, is consistency, right? We talked earlier about how if we don't manage transitions well, that unpredictability is terrifying. Well, it's the same thing. So if you will consistently do these things over time, it's not that you're a reasonable person that allows compromises on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but the rest of the week it's commanded demand. That's just not going to work. I know a lot of people do that, and it's just not going to work.
What if we high five that? I meant if we get a high five from the child, the whole Tuesday, Wednesday.
Oh, I thought you wanted a high five.
Like if the kids are in agreement.
There was a little high five that happened in the studio just now.
Unaffirmed. That's okay. Shawn has cameras. People saw.
That's true.
Success.
That's true. You were left hanging. Here, hold on. Here we go.
I was left hanging.
Come on. All right.
So all I'm trying to say, Shawn, is that we've been doing this for a long time, right? Parenting kids this way, and so we're able to see success. And success doesn't mean compliance, right? We have to make that point. Success doesn't mean compliance. Yep. Because last night, what I deemed to be success was at the end of 10 years of speaking into this. And so last night, there's some stuff had happened in our home, and we finally got that to a peaceful place and ready to go with the amazing sleight of hand appearance of electric toothbrushes that I purchased at the Dollar Tree earlier that day. And the kids like, oh, toothbrushes, and then we're excited about brushing their teeth and going to bed. And they were done with that, and they'd come back in the kitchen, and I said, okay, guys, it's time to go to bed. And one of my daughters said, no. And I said, sweetheart, I will work with you on anything. I will, except if you yell no at me like that. And then I'm just going to that's not okay.
Right.
That is not okay to do that. And she said, can I get some water first? Absolutely, sweetheart. And she did, and there was no more crisis. She was corrected, but it's based on the fact that we have consistently invested into that relationship the entirety of her life in our home. That's right. That we are able to operate in that space. And that's one of the things we have to really clearly communicate to parents all of the time is you have to consistently invest in the relationship. You will see the fruit, but you don't throw some seeds in the ground and go pick up strawberries the next day.
What?
There's like a whole process.
What if you throw strawberries with seeds on them in the ground? Can you then go pick them up the next day?
Yes, but they're not very fresh.
It's kind of like eating a soggy salt cake.
Oh, I don't even know what that means.
I thought we deleted
Episode 3.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's time to wrap this up, Shawn.
So let me jump in because I need to. I've been hanging this right here. There's, I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but there was a blood vessel that popped out a few moments ago.
There's a wrinkle there now
because I said something that I need to dial back, and I don't want to edit it out later. So
he's going to walk it back.
I'm just going to walk it back live, and that is I made some sort of a statement, and the details elude me a little bit, but something to the effect of you're not parenting unless you have engaged children, and that's just not true. So for those of you who are hopefully still listening that heard me accuse all of you who are struggling with your child's engagement and you think that I think you're not parenting, nothing could be further from the truth. I want to pull that back.
That's good. That's a good word.
So we're nearing the end. I'm not quite ready to wrap it up because I do want to get one more piece in here, because here's what I think as parents. I know I'm guilty of this, and I've supported a lot of parents in my career so far, and so far most of the parents that I've supported have been guilty of this. Some of them have taught me a lot. Many of them have taught me a lot, but for us to go into this concept of we're going to help our children manage transitions, I think that it's important that we realize, and it should be coming through in all of these episodes that we're doing, is when we talk about things that we're going to help our children do, what we're really talking about is how we're managing ourselves.
That's right.
Right? Because the kids are going to be the kids, and there's this just erroneous idea out there that one human has the ability to control another human on this planet, and regardless of if you birthed them, that's hard to say, birthed?
Birth.
Words are hard.
I do like your accent when you say that word, though.
You did good, though.
Regardless of whether you birthed them, adopted them, are borrowing them from someone else, had them dumped on you, whatever the circumstances are.
They're on loan.
Yeah, like you don't control them. They're as autonomous as you
That's
are.
right.
And at whatever stage they're at, they have whatever skills they bring to the table. But if you want to impact your experience with a child, you've always 100% of the time got to start with you.
We need to get out of the business of thinking we can make people change.
Yep.
Or that we can change people. Either one of those. It's
a nice fantasy to have, though.
right.
I mean, because I really think, just, I know we're supposed to be talking about parenting here, but just think of every single other realm, right? My wife and I have spoken about this before, but we're firm believers that every year or so you should probably have a couple of sessions with a marriage therapist, even if
Little tune-up.
yeah, because
Right.
I mean,
Take your car in to get tuned up. Why wouldn't you a marriage?
that's exactly the.
You take your car in to get it tuned up?
I usually do it myself. But
Okay, thank you. Yep, there we go. That analogy just fell apart.
most people.
Most people accept the idea you need to change the oil on the car.
That's right.
But don't necessarily accept the idea that we need to change the oil on relationships. And so having an unbiased person who can sit and just talk you through some stuff is really, really valuable. And so Kayla and I went to a guy. Can I say his name?
Sure.
Dr. Les Carter, who a very wise man. But one of my favorite things about Les is he wrote a book called "Pleasing You Is Killing Me," and I think it's just a really great title for a book. But he said that when you're having a conversation with someone and they're speaking, but you speak over them, you raise your voice, you increase the cadence of your speech, or you get an aggressive tone. He said all of those are attempts to control them. And I thought, wow, I hadn't thought about any of that stuff. And so if I will accept that and it has revolutionized the way my wife and I speak to each other about things. Now, we still disagree about stuff because, sometimes one of us agrees and one of us is wrong. I won't tell you.
Wow.
No, I was confessing that sometimes I'm wrong, Lori.
Oh, I know.
What was the wow about? So, but it really has revolutionized the way we talk about each other because of that. Talk to each other, because of that. Because I really actually, it bothers me if I was in a place where my wife thought I was trying to control her. And so I accept that in relationship with my bride. Then do I accept that in relationship with my children? And the answer has got to be yes, even though the answer is probably in lived practicality. No, I don't accept that. Yeah. And so I just think that my job is not to control my children. My job is to raise them in, what does the Bible say, in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord? That's my job. And so if I'm going to raise them to be, what is the goal of parenting? I ask people this all the time in some version of, we want to raise healthy, well-adjusted, productive members of society who raise the Lord. That sounds great. And then the follow-up question is, well, what are you prepared to do that? Are you prepared to check your swing? Are you prepared to bite your tongue? Are you prepared to consider their feelings? And because those are the things you have to do if you want to raise that child.
Right.
And so, people ask me, do I believe that healing is real? And a lady asked me last year if I believed that healing was real. And I said, no, I don't. And she kind of was taken aback. I said, I don't have to believe. I know. This does not require faith on my part because I've seen it. Yeah. But we had to do it consistently every day. So that's my closing thoughts. So I know you're about to ask for my closing thoughts. I gave them in advance.
You're a great team player, Ryan. I love you.
Okay, I'm proactive, my friend, which is the message of connected parenting.
Yeah. So we are to the closing thought segment of the show, and I want to ask you for yours, Lori, in just a second. But it strikes me in the middle of this. I want to go ahead and say it. If you're not aware, we have set up a Facebook group, and it's a Facebook group that's specifically for folks that would like to build community around this show, and the topics that we discuss, connect with other folks that are struggling and succeeding, or struggling and failing in their parenting efforts. The URL is going to be facebook.com groups, and then the title of the group is Foster Family Matters. It's the title of our podcast. We'll put some links around in various places, probably link it in the show notes on this episode and maybe going forwards. But if you would like to join the conversation, Lori and Ryan and I will be popping in and out and looking at comments and available for interaction in that forum. And we'd love to exchange our thoughts with you. We'd love for you to challenge our ideas. If you're sitting there right now and you're like, man, these guys are just so far off their rocker, or something that I hear all the time is, yeah, but you don't know my child and you don't know my circumstances, right? And you're right. We don't yet, but introduce us to you in that way. Lori.
Closing thoughts
on transitions.
All right, I'm gonna beg you guys to follow me down this rabbit hole to a place of connection.
That
with
doesn't
everything
feel like closing thoughts.
We're talking about what's really interesting and fascinating to me is that you can go to a preschool classroom of 21, 23 kids and one, maybe two teachers with a TA, and they go from centers to circle time to snack to lunchtime, and they corral like little sheep to a shepherd. They listen and they follow directions for the most part. And we're talking about 3 and 4 year olds. The number one reason that they go and jump from transition to transition is because there's a song in between every single transition. So it's playful.
Yep.
It's rhythmic,
Yep.
It's patterned, it's predictable, and it's the same song every single day with the same tone.
Is it I Love Rock and Roll?
It could be. I don't know what preschool you went to, but
When you said we went from circle time to snack time, I'm like, that's my day at the office.
And so I say that to bring it back to, there's going to be some parents that may already be doing this with their little ones. There's going to be some that may feel really ridiculous singing. Because being playful is hard as an adult. And I think my urge is my charge behind you is to find that middle ground and find what works for you, but make it predictable and consistent every single day and help your kids transition. And the more times we do that, you'll see those little sheep will start viewing you as their shepherd, and you get to feel that role for them, and you get to guide them and lead them in the way that you want them to go.
You know, I just had a great idea, and we can't do it now because of the time constraints, and maybe we can come back to this, is you said earlier, Lori, about how if you considered how many transitions you have in your day, it's really just a string of activities placed in between transitions, right? Mm-hmm. You have to transition from being asleep to being awake, from being in your bed to out. I mean, just every single new thing.
Think of a high school student from class to class to class.
So here's my suggestion. We'll write down 10 or 15 scenarios, give them to Shawn, and he can just randomly pick them. Say, well, how would you handle this transition?
Ooh, pop quiz.
Yeah. So
like
for me, leaving to go to work. By the time I do that, some of my kids are awake already.
Yeah. And
so transitioning from being dad to my car actually has repercussions for the children, and so we've had to do some things over the years to kind of help them with that, because if I don't handle that transition well, it sets their day up for failure, which sets my wife's day up for failure,
dominoes,
which sets my day up for failure, right? I mean, the dominoes fall. So I mean, it's not just about the kids. There are actually ripple effects that go through the whole family if you don't handle these things well.
I mean, even as professionals, going from a meeting into a therapy session, that's a transition.
That's what
for
I meant
me,
from circle time to snack time. After a meeting, I have to have a snack.
Well, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed and find the discussion today beneficial. And a little known fact, we don't talk about it, but we are a Christian agency, and Ryan and Lori and I gather around and pray before each one of these recordings, and I think it's important, not in a self-aggrandizing way, but in a way to let you know that we've prayed for you. We've prayed that the words that we speak would not just fall on rocky soil, but that if you're out there and in need of hearing this, that it'll eventually make it to your ears, and we just hope that you're blessed and edified with whatever it is. Give us feedback. That Facebook group that I talked about earlier would be a great place to let us know where you're struggling and what sorts of topics you'd like for us to talk about in the future. I don't know that this is necessarily, I think we've meandered all over the place today around transitions and through them, and we maybe even took the train for a while.
Obstacle course.
So obviously the episode will be titled Meandering.
Yeah, right.
The insane musings of the minds of...
Ryan and Shawn.
There we go.
So my closing thought, and then I've got a pitch for what we're really excited for the summer, but my closing thought is something that, and I think it's in line with what we've talked about today. I had the opportunity to speak to a foster parent one time, and they were talking to me about their experience in parenting a child that they did not give birth to, but I think that it really transcends and goes across the board. And she said to me, it's a wonderful feeling to look into the eyes of a child and feel yourself falling in love with them.
Powerful.
And then she said, but it is so freaking cool to look into the eyes of a child and see them falling in love with you.
Love that.
And I think that's key, right?
Like legitimate goosebumps, by the way.
Because that's where it's at, right? Like, kids aren't obligations. Kids aren't something we have to do so we can get to whatever's next on our agenda. Like, they're what we do. They're why we do it.
So good.
Okay, let me. So if you're still watching, this is our longest episode yet, unless I slash and hash it to death, which I won't. But we have something that I think we're very excited about. Are we excited?
Yes.
Yes.
So
we are.
So we are going to do a summer reading club, and we are going to use, hold that up again, The Whole Brain Child. Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson
Yep.
are the authors of that book. We'll put links in the show notes to this episode and then each of the next several, where you can go and pick up a copy of that book if you would like. Here's what it is. So this is a book that our organization requires that our foster families read when they're caring for children, and we've all read it. We've benefited from the knowledge in this book. There's 12 strategies that are important in this book, and we're going to focus on those 12 strategies. So this won't be like a chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. We're gonna take a chapter at a time, but we're gonna skip ahead to chapter 2. I think it is. It has the first 2 strategies. Is that right?
I think that sounds right to me. This book, just to know how much I love this book, I think everybody should read it, because the strategies in here are applicable to everybody. It's not written with the at-risk population in mind. This is just a broad book. I tell people you should read this book if you have children, if you once were a child, and if you ever have to deal with anybody who was once a child themselves. My wife and I are on the read this book once a year cycle. So,
cool.
So I'm currently.
It's a nice reminders.
Because I'm actually read it once a year. I read it once and have listened to the audiobook.
Yeah.
It just as a reminder and take notes, and it's just amazing to me how many notes I was taking last weekend on a flight, with stuff that I just had either didn't hear the first time,
that's it,
or had forgotten in the intervening here. And so that's just amazing to me, because it really is true that sometimes you're just not at a place to hear some things. And so we're going to talk through some of those, and I'm really excited that we're doing it.
So the plan will the next episode that comes out will be the first in this series, and it'll probably run about 5 episodes or so, something to that effect, if we do our math correctly with the strategies. We encourage you, if you're part of a small group, consider using our podcast for the next couple of months as your discussion topic. Pick up the book, read it in your small group, discuss it, listen to our thoughts, come on into our Facebook group and tell us how our thoughts are all ridiculous and how we're wrong. And we just want that kind of interaction with you guys, and we hope that it'll be as much of a blessing to you as it will be for us. So that's what you have to look forward to. And I'll go ahead and close this out, guys. Thanks so much for sticking in here with us for this longer episode. And remember to like and thumbs up and star and rate highly if you believe highly in our little project here. And like I continuously say, especially share it to those folks that you don't like, because we have winning personalities, and we are changing lives. You have no idea, guys. The type of feedback I have, at least one person every 60 or 90 days that says, "Wow, y'all are really good."
And then one person each of the intervening days that says the opposite. No,
that's right. No,
just messing.
Thanks so much, guys. We'll look forward to talking to you next time.
Hey,
Bye.
We love you dearly and care for you deeply.